on this Saturday night, a ceasefire deal in doubt. Hours after India and Pakistan announced a truce, new explosions rattle the volatile and densely populated region.
What happens next can be really devastating.
The stakes and the accusations. A new push to pause the fighting in Europe's bloodiest battlefield. Ukraine, backed by Western allies, offers a 30-day ceasefire. A cross-border gesture turning heads in Montreal. Why Americans traveled north to make peace with their pocketbooks. And the dog who won't stay down.
This is Oscar.
Left for dead, but now stealing hearts. How Oscar got his second chance.
Global National, reporting tonight, Neetu Garchar.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. After a hopeful start to the day, relations between two nuclear-armed rivals appear to be holding on by a thread. India is accusing Pakistan tonight of violating a U.S.-brokered ceasefire the two nations signed early this morning, a claim Islamabad has denied. The deal would have paused days of deadly clashes and the largest flare-up in violence between the countries in decades. Now, concerns are growing over the future of the conflict and the potential ripple effects around the world. Touria Izri has tonight's top story.
Shelling lights up the night sky, threatening to undo a fragile agreement.
This is a breach of the understanding arrived at earlier today.
India's foreign secretary accused Pakistan of violating the ceasefire, meant to stop days of deadly drone strikes between rivals. A claim Pakistan's information minister says is not accurate. The flare-up began last month after a massacre in India-administered Kashmir. The Indian government blamed Pakistan for harboring the terror group responsible, which it denies. Crowds in Islamabad celebrated Saturday's agreement, but hours after it was announced, blasts erupted along the border.
There's going to be a lot of friction in the aftermath of the Trump-negotiated ceasefire. We're still at a hair trigger.
The deal was announced by U.S. President Donald Trump on social media. After a long night of talks mediated by the United States, both countries have agreed to a full, immediate ceasefire, using common sense and great intelligence. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said he and Vice President J.D. Vance engaged with senior officials over the last 48 hours, including Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Concerned about any time
2 days earlier, Vance had signaled the U.S. was staying out of the conflict.
We're not going to get involved in the middle of a war that's fundamentally none of our business.
So far, only Pakistan has acknowledged the U.S. role in talks, with the Prime Minister thanking Trump.
What happens next can be really devastating, both for the people in Pakistan and India, but also for the world, which cannot afford another major conflict.
Hope that a ceasefire can prevent a confrontation between nuclear powers from escalating further. Touria Izri, Global News, Montreal.
There's another push for a ceasefire in Russia's war on Ukraine. With the backing of the U.S. and EU leaders, Kyiv is now proposing a 30-day ceasefire with Russia, with the threat of more economic sanctions if the Kremlin fails to comply. But as Candice Cole reports, Vladimir Putin's government remains vague on whether they will agree.
As Russian President Vladimir Putin hosted allies at the Kremlin to celebrate the 80th anniversary of Nazi Germany's defeat, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, alongside the leaders of France, Germany, Poland, and the UK, spoke with U.S. President Donald Trump and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney via phone, during which the so-called Coalition of the Willing hammered out the details of a new peace proposal.
We agreed that starting Monday, May 12th, there should be a full and unconditional ceasefire for at least 30 days.
The four heads of state who paid tribute to Ukraine's fallen soldiers in Kyiv met on the last day of Russian President Vladimir Putin's proposed 3-day ceasefire, which Zelensky previously dismissed as, quote, unserious. Zelensky says the month-long ceasefire should cover air, sea, and land. If Putin refuses, Russia would be hit with even more economic and energy sanctions.
And so all of us here, together with the US, are calling Putin out. If he's serious about peace, then he has a chance to show it now.
Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has said previously that Russia would support a 30-day ceasefire with the consideration of, quote, nuances. But Macron called any talk of conditions a delay tactic. Peskov said Saturday that Putin is open to dialogue, but said,
"We hear a lot of contradictory statements from Europe. They are generally confrontational in nature rather than aimed at trying to revive our relations. Nothing more."
While residents in Kyiv are hopeful this proposal could finally bring an end to the war, like this woman who believes the pressure on Putin may force him to agree to the ceasefire, Zelensky remains skeptical of Russia's intent to follow through.
We have no illusions that the ceasefire will be breached. There will be breaches.
Just the day before the European heads of state met Saturday in Kyiv, the American embassy warned of a, quote, potentially significant air attack on Ukraine's capital by Russia in the coming days. Neetu?
Candice Cole in Washington. Thanks, Candice. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas met with Putin today while visiting Moscow to take part in Victory Day celebrations. Abbas thanked Putin for Russian aid to Gaza and rejected U.S. President Trump's proposals to take control of the enclave. The talks happened as Israeli strikes killed more than 20 people in Gaza today. The humanitarian crisis is also deepening there as Israel's aid blockade into the territory enters its third month. High-stakes talks between the U.S. and China got underway today in Switzerland as the world's two largest economies try to ease tensions over trade. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent met with a delegation led by China's vice premier in Geneva today. The goal is to scale back the triple-digit tariffs each side has leveled against the other. So far, there's no sign of a breakthrough, although the two sides have reportedly agreed to meet again tomorrow. U.S. President Donald Trump has promoted expanding his country's oil and gas production since beginning his second term in office. But his passion for oil and gas exploration is running into the reality of slumping global oil prices, something that has also pushed Canadian oil firms to start preparing for tougher times ahead. Heather Yourex-West on the implications of the price decline on Alberta's financial fortunes.
In the heart of Canada's energy sector, it is an anxious time.
So much of what happens in Calgary is tied to global markets. We're more exposed to what happens with the oil price, which we know has been sliding because of OPEC's decision to increase production.
In January, the price of a barrel of West Texas Intermediate, the U.S. benchmark, and the price the Alberta government forecasts its budget by was around $68 a barrel. Today, it's $10 less.
These are kind of very low oil prices now. Lowest they've kind of sustained. They've been on a sustained basis since essentially 2020.
Prices have dropped largely because OPEC, the group of oil-producing countries that account for roughly a third of the world's oil, has ramped up production considerably at a time when global demand has started to slow.
This isn't a crisis for the industry yet. The bigger problem will be for the Alberta government and its deficit, probably.
The Alberta government, already in the red with a $5 billion deficit, could see its shortfall double to $10 billion or more. Production growth within the Canadian industry is also expected to slow.
Let's say from more than 200,000 barrels a day last year to maybe something more like 50 to 100,000 barrels a day this year.
It's already costing jobs. Calgary-based Cenovus this week confirming it was trimming its workforce in an effort to remain competitive, while Suncor says it may cut investment next year to weather the storm.
There's no drill, baby, drill when oil prices are sitting where they are right now. And companies are responding to market signals.
Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
Donald Trump's effects continue to be felt at the Canada-U.S. border. In March, flights to Canada by Americans were up by 1.2% over last year, but vehicle trips saw a 10.6% decline. Today, a group of Americans hopped in their cars and headed to Montreal to show their support for Canada and to plead for their northern neighbors to reciprocate. Dan Spector reports.
I'm from Vermont.
The Vermont state treasurer buys some Quebec maple syrup at the Jean Talon market in U.S. dollars and admits something he probably would not admit in front of his constituents south of the border.
In the spirit of friendship, just for today, I'll admit that Canadian maple syrup is better than Vermont.
Bonjour. Pijak is one of a handful of Vermonters who trekked up to Montreal on Saturday in an attempt to mend the wounds created by President Trump.
What we wanted to say to Canadian citizens is we are friends. Vermont is different than our president. Vermont is different than our country. We're going to continue to respect Canadians.
Their trip comes amid a steep decline in Canadian visitors to the Green Mountain State, which relies on cross-border tourism.
The tourism traffic has been down 20-25% in terms of the border crossings. So that's really concerning to us.
The mayor of Burlington, traditionally a popular destination for Quebecers, says her city has an $8 million budget shortfall this year. And one reason for that is the drop in cross-border tourists.
The anxiety is high. I would encourage folks to remember, let's think about this on a regional, local, very local level. And remember, Vermont is the same place it was before President Trump was president.
The event was not just about Vermont's bottom line. Anti-Trump activists from both sides of the border got people together to reaffirm a fractured friendship.
I just hope they realize that the folks in Vermont, we're very different. We consider ourselves an extension of Canada. We'd love to be a part of Canada. Maybe someday, you never know.
The current administration, how they're treating Canada, we're disgusted by it.
A message that some Montrealers sympathize with.
I'm so happy that they're reaching out also, but that's the nature of Vermonters and hopefully other Americans, that we are their friends, their partners.
They are not the enemies of Canada. They are not enemies of Montreal.
Democratic governors from northeastern states have requested a meeting with Canadian premiers in Boston in the coming weeks to talk tariffs as this cross-border collaboration movement continues. Dan Spector, Global News, Montreal.
Ballots will be recounted in 4 tightly contested ridings following last week's federal election. 2 of the ridings are in Ontario. 1 is in Quebec. The 4th is in Newfoundland and Labrador. Each of the 4 ridings was won by less than 100 votes. Even if they all turn out to be Liberal victories, the party will still be 1 short of the 172 seats required to form a majority government. There is a dangerous, highly volatile wildfire situation near the northern Manitoba community of the Paw tonight. The fire, which has forced around 350 evacuations, is burning to the north, west, and east of the community.
This fire is really having a mind of its own. Everyone that has had, some people have had 30, 35 years experience fighting these wildfires is surprised by its movements. When we think it's going to go one way, it goes another way.
The human-caused fire is now approximately 21,000 hectares and growing. Breaking down the Carney-Trump Oval Office visit and what's really at stake in this new chapter of cross-border politics. Coming up, a one-on-one with Canada's top diplomat in Washington. All eyes were on Washington Tuesday as Team Canada's new leader, Prime Minister Mark Carney, entered the Oval Office for his first high-stakes face-to-face with President Trump. I spoke with Canada's ambassador to the United States, Kirsten Hillman, to find out more about their talks. I began by asking her whether the discussion was as constructive as both leaders suggested.
It really was. Thank you very much for having me, I should start by saying. So what you saw in public in the Oval Office press conference was very much the tone that continued on in private. I think that we saw 2 leaders who were eager to have a concrete and serious conversation on a wide range of different topics, and who were eager to find a way to, chart a path together for the Canada-US relationship. So it's a really important first step. We've got lots of steps ahead of us, but it was a really important first step.
It seemed President Trump was unequivocal in saying there's no deal yet to lift tariffs on Canadian goods like steel, aluminum, and auto. What's Canada's strategy going forward to make progress on that front?
We didn't go into this meeting expecting to come out with a deal. This was really an opportunity for the 2 leaders to meet, to get to know each other, to have an exchange on a wide range of topics, which they did. And to also, from Canada's perspective, place our economic relationship in the context of our broader relationship. And going forward, as you know, as the two leaders said, they are going to, they've instructed us, and they are to work on helping them strike a deal for Canada and U.S. that, of course, from Canada's perspective, will deal with the tariffs and deal with, hopefully, stability going forward. But what is super clear right now is that the goal is to have a Canada-U.S. conversation around some very specific economic, but economic security topics as well, and security topics like our border, like our mutual fight against fentanyl.
Okay, and talking about security, Prime Minister Carney rejected the idea of Canada becoming the 51st state, but Trump didn't drop it. Is this, in your eyes, just political theater, or does it perhaps complicate serious defense talks like with NORAD and the Arctic?
I think the Prime Minister could not have been clearer with respect to the will of Canadians that this is never going to happen. There were a wide range of topics that were discussed in the private meeting, and obviously Canada's actions in the Arctic, some investments we're making up there.
What's actually different in how Ottawa plans to approach this White House compared to the last term?
I think that if you sense the sort of mood and the tenor coming from the White House, I think that they are really eager to engage. I think the president is adopting a very positive attitude towards working with not only Canada, but working with Prime Minister Carney. Now, does that mean there won't be turbulence? Does that mean that this will be something that is smooth sailing? It's hard to predict, and I've been now ambassador for 5 years here in Washington. What I have found is that when we have issues that are complicated and difficult to navigate, we ultimately get through them. One, because there's a will to do so, but that will comes from the fact that both countries realize that that is in the best interest of their citizens, given all of these deep ties. Economic, security, energy, all of it is what drives the relationship.
Ambassador Hillman, we appreciate your time and insight. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Digital map diplomatic dispute ahead. Why Mexico is taking Google to court over a name change it says crosses the line. Pope Leo held his first meeting with the cardinals at the Vatican today, discussing how he wants to lead the Catholic Church. He singled out artificial intelligence as one of today's biggest issues.
Ringrazio tutti voi per questo incontro.
The pontiff says developments in AI pose new challenges for the defense of human dignity, justice, and labor. This as he explained how he wanted to honor his namesake, Pope Leo XIII, an advocate for social justice and workers' rights. Leo also says he wants to carry on Pope Francis's legacy of making the church more inclusive. Today he visited and prayed at Francis's tomb, paying respects to his predecessor. Mexico is suing Google for labeling the Gulf of Mexico as Gulf of America on Google Maps for American users. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum announced the lawsuit on Friday, arguing the move violates the sovereignty and international recognition of Mexican territory. She says the U.S. can change the names of places within its own territory, but names beyond its borders should be respected, and that Google should clearly distinguish between the respective areas. A toy poodle left for dead. Next, the recovery of a little dog named Oscar and the woman who refused to let him go. They say you can't keep a good dog down, and that certainly seems to be the case for one toy poodle in Vancouver. Last month, it was found in a garbage can, and as Troy Charles shows us, the pup's resilience and recovery would wipe the frown off any grouch.
Oh my God, are you okay?
Injured and left for dead, this toy poodle was found by a couple in a garbage can in Pacific Spirit Park.
Montreal, in this garbage.
Now, a month later,
this is Oscar.
The aptly named Oscar is thriving.
He has 3 cracked ribs, which are healing nicely. Last week, he received his stitches out and saw Dr. King. He was extremely happy with how his recovery is going.
Oscar also had successful surgery on a broken front leg and broken hip.
Come on, Maxie.
The couple who found Oscar brought him to dog rescuer Lori Schilt. Schilt says after the story gained attention, she received over 100 applications from people wanting to adopt the dog.
I don't know the past story he was through, but I just didn't feel it would be good for him to be passed along to somewhere else after being so bonded with me. And I felt pretty hard for him. I really did.
Aquapaw's Canine Wellness Center stepped up and sponsored Oscar's rehab. The pup has been getting acupuncture, agility work, and time on an underwater treadmill.
Come on. Now he's come out of his shell. He runs, he plays, he has a big brother at home named Nico. He's a silver lab. Follows him everywhere.
RCMP do not have an update on their investigation and are still trying to track down Oscar's original owner.
You know, it's hard to believe that somebody could be so cruel as to do what they did to him, you know, knowing he was so hurt.
As animals tend to do, Oscar came into Schilt's life at the right time, as she had recently lost her own small dog of 15 years.
I said out loud, I really wish I had another small dog. 2 days later, the call came. Oh, did you hear that? And did you hear that? Look at
While Oscar's name is fitting, thanks to his second chance at life, he is no grouch. Troy Charles, Global News.
Oh, that face. What a comeback story. That is Global National for this Saturday night. I'm Neetu Garcha. Tonight's Your Canada showcases this patriotic whirligig in Half Moon Bay, BC, the Douglas War Memorial in Douglas, Manitoba, and the coast of Winterton, Newfoundland and Labrador. Please keep sending your pictures of Canadian pride to globalnational@globalnews.ca. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great night.